Hey guys, Bart coming to you from TST Industries in Florida, bringing you another episode of TST Garage. In this episode, we have a Kawasaki Z400 behind me on the lift, and we'll be showing you how to install our new TST Industries integrated tail light on that bike. Kawasaki did a pretty nice job of capping off the tail end of this bike, but I think that they missed a few cues from the rest of the design language of this bike, and that's why we redesigned our taillight to take advantage of some of those body lines a little bit better. Here you see the two different versions we offer. One is clear lens, one is smoked lens. The rest of the geometry and functionality is exactly the same on these two. It's just that most people opt for one or the other variant, so we wanted to bring you what you guys typically like. We did put on our 9-state programmable circuit into this taillight. You will be able to access 9 different program states via the press of a button that remains accessible after the installation. You just blow your passenger seat off, push that button, you toggle on to the next program. The installation of this taillight is exactly the same as the OEM unit. We have outfitted the main plug of this unit to be exactly the same as on the OEM setup. And then we also have the signal plugs that go into the harness effortlessly, basically mimicking the OEM components that come off with your fender lighting. The installation's pretty straightforward. It does require the removal of several body panels. We will break this down for you and show you step by step. So in a minute, I'll show you that. You guys can follow along and know that you at home can actually make this installation work and be successful. Anytime you go from incandescent lights in your signaling system to LED type lamps, whether it be pod signals, flush mount signals, or an LED tail light that has signals built in, you will need to do something about the hyperflash symptom that gets created because you're drawing much less current from your signaling system than the OEM setup would have. So every one of these lights that ships out from us is equipped with load balancing resistors because that has kind of become the industry standard. If you do not want to wire in those resistors, I never do. It's cumbersome. You've ended up with heated elements that are flopping around in your tail section. I just don't like that. It is industry standard, but we do have a far superior means of combating the hyperflash. We do have a Gen 2F flasher relay. It's a plug and play component. We do have a separate video showing you how to install that part on this bike. So you can look for that on our website or our YouTube channel. Here I'll demonstrate quickly. We have the same plug as the OEM setup does. Just plug it in place of the OEM unit and you're good to go. This comes preset at 85 cycles per minute, which is OEM rate. If you don't like that, if you want to fine tune it, slip off the gray cover. You can access this adjuster here, turn it clockwise, counterclockwise to produce the flash rate that you like. Anyway, that's a separate video. I just wanted to mention it in this video so you guys know what to expect when you purchase one of these. And now I'm done yapping. Let's get on over to the bike and start wrenching. And I'm really chomping at the bit to show you guys what this thing looks like on the bike. Let's go. This particular bike that we're using to showcase the installation on already has our Elite 1 adjustable fender eliminator installed on it, so you will not see the removal of the fender components in this video. If you want to see those steps, please see the Elite 1 fender eliminator installation video that we have already posted for you guys. Let's put this to the side, take off the seats, and get started. We're going to start the disassembly of the tail components using a 4mm Allen wrench. Make sure you keep track of your screws because they do vary in size, length, and head type. And also what kind of washer is on certain ones. So you want to put them close to where they're going back so that you don't mix them up. Switch over to a 3mm Allen here and pull out this fastener here. Now we can pry back on this panel. It has several interference geometry friction fasteners that fit using a peg into a rubber grommet, so they need to be pulled out perpendicular to the center plane of the bike, and that exposes this screw here. It is a Phillips type screw. We will need to pull that out. All right. And now this panel here is free to come out. However, it does have several more of these friction fasteners, and also it has a sliding lock clip at the end. So we want to make sure that we retain this tip of the panel in place as we pull out the friction fasteners. And then once the friction fasteners are clear, we will rotate this way and push backwards. That'll clear the last locking element here. These little tabs interface with this interference geometry here and lock together. If you snap this off, then you will no longer be able to lock these two together. So I recommend being very, very patient with this process. Now we'll hop on over to the other side of the bike and repeat the procedure. I'm going to start with the 4mm Allen again from the bottom. Jump forward here. The screws are actually in the same location on both sides. So I'm doing what I just showed you guys on the right side of the motorcycle, just on the left here. Keeping track of my screws. I'm going to pull out this fastener using a 3mm Allen. And these do have these plastic washers that I want to keep on those screws. And now the black forward panel is free to come out from the friction fasteners. Again, Phillips screwdriver to remove that one machine screw. And now this panel is pretty much free to come out. The only difference between the right and left components here is that this left component carries the lock that unlocks the seat latch here. So to make this really, really simple, I like to remove the seat latch from the bike for this installation. It just makes everything much, much simpler. The latch has two Phillips head screws. Those come out pretty easy. We'll remove the top plate that retains the latch. And now the latch mechanism here has this cable on it, and the cable is routed through a catch or a guiding clip here. So we'll get it out from that management clip, and now this panel will be free to come out essentially in the same order and type of procedure as the right side. Again, we want to make sure not to snap that little clip off from the tail end. Be very, very gentle and you'll be successful. Now we clear the latch, take this off, and now we'll focus on removing this top center part. I will grab an 8mm socket and I will remove these four fasteners here. They do have shoulder washers with them, so you make sure that you retain those. Now we'll grab our trusty Phillips again, and there is another set of screws here and here on either side of this tail fairing that need to come out. They look exactly the same as the forward screws from the side panels. Now we have to clear two snap fasteners. They are rivet type plastic fasteners. Center pops in, that resets it, and it'll come out. All right, now this panel is free to come out with one note. There is 1, 2 slide fasteners here again that go sort of on a ramping geometry, so they'll need to get pulled out, and then this whole thing comes out. Pull those towards the rear. Again, you want to be very, very careful and patient with how you remove this, otherwise you'll snap this and the tail components will never go back together the way they were meant to. So now we'll pull back on this tray. I like to get it bungeed to something. You can also actually remove it. I typically like to remove this on my bikes. It gives me more space in here, but that's pretty much up to you. Let's find the main wire for the tail light here. It is routed through a grommet. We'll follow it back to here. Now, the plug is hung up on a feature of the frame here. We can work it out, and I've done that so you guys can see the lock mechanism here. It does have a locking feature that we will need to press, and then it comes out. And you can route it to the back here. And now let's start pulling out some of the screws that will allow us to remove this thing off the bike. All the screws on the tail light end here will be Phillips type. These two unfasten the undertail, and these two, after removal, they will permit us to remove this tongue feature that interfaces with the tail light. Now this is pretty much free. What we can do here with this particular fender eliminator, we can loosen it a little bit to give ourselves a little bit more room. I've actually changed these taillights without that step, but this step does actually make it a lot easier. So I'm going to show it to you guys in the easier of methods. Loosening the fender eliminator, or if you still have the fender, loosening the fender will make the whole undertail move a little bit more freely, and will make this next step a lot easier. We have two more screws here. Both of them are Phillips type. Now that this is loose, we could actually articulate and re-angle the axis of each screw so that it's easier to grab with a Phillips head screwdriver. So now we remove these two screws. And now comes a Tetris session, sort of. Now we will need to clear this taillight off of these bosses that it sits on. The grommets actually interface with bosses that stick up from the undertail. So we push up on the taillight until taillight dislodges from those bosses. We will do that one side at a time. Can't really do both sides. And then we will have to reorient the tail light off axis here so that we can start extracting it from the undertail. And if you're patient and follow what I've done here, you can successfully take it out without any fuss. Now we'll have to scavenge these two grommets. They will be reused on our new tail light. Just have to be gentle enough not to rip them. All right, and now we'll grab our new taillight and start the reinstallation process. For this video, we've chosen the smoked variant of the taillight. I think it really complements the whole look of this bike, so we're going to go with smoked. We will need to replace our grommets in the same locations on this taillight. Just need to make sure that they are actually concentric in there, and typically just rotate them around a little bit until they do fall into concentricity. Looks good to go. You see this acceptor here. I'll just take that tab feature and get fastened down. Now we can undo the cable tie here, stretch out the wires, get them fed through. I just like to seat them in the grommet that originally held the taillight wiring. Now we need to pretty much go in the reverse order of disassembly of the OEM unit, wiggle this thing in there until we could seat these grommets on these bosses here. So I'll do that now. And that's really straightforward. Like I said, it's the reverse order of disassembly. Now you can see that there are gaps here, but they pretty much match the OEM gaps. What can happen though is during reassembly here, you can potentially just tighten down on all these screws in an order that will tweak this to one side, and then you will not really like the installation. So what I like to do is get all of my small self-threading screws that came off in the removal, get them threaded up, but not all the way down. Just a little snug, but still keeping some adjustability here. And then Get the main bosses of the taillight threaded in. Those can actually go to the bottom. Now do note that you are turning self-threading fasteners into plastic bosses. You do not want to over tighten that connection. You can actually damage the threads. Once you bottom these screws out, you want to give them perhaps a 15-degree extra rotation, and then that's about it. Now the screws that hold the undertail onto the frame in the back go in, and again, I do like to leave a little bit of leeway here. Now we are going to tighten everything from the midsection back. I'm going to align and tighten up my fender eliminator components. In the case that you might be still using OEM fender, it would be the fender bolts that get tightened down. Now, the forward self-threading screws get tightened down just a little bit. And if you're having a mismatch in the gap width, you can push and pull on these as you tighten, and that'll equalize them. Now the rearmost on the tab feature go last. Again, you can manipulate where they end up. And that looks good to me. So now we will actually plug in the light. We have ample wire length here that I can get this plug over to this side so I can show you guys how it goes. Main plug gets plugged in and does have this feature that goes on the frame and gets hung back up the way it hung originally. And then we get our signal plugs, and we can take down the boot from the rest of the connections and expose them and get these things plugged in. After I plug the signals in, I like to test everything, make sure I plug the correct side into the correct plug. Power up the bike, running light, brake light, and we have the signal. As you can see, it's flashing fast. So now let's move on to the reverse order of disassembly. I'll start with the top center here. Remember to engage these interference geometry clips on the way back in. Also, the painted surface goes under the black plastic surface. Once that's slid together, we can start placing the fasteners. Now the next 4 fasteners will have these shoulder washers. Make sure that you drop them into the slot in the forward location and make it concentric in the hole in the rear location. If you get them hung up with the shoulder portion on the plastic, you'll squeeze it together during fastening and deform your plastic. You don't want that. Now we'll start on this panel by passing the latch in. Make sure that we catch that routing guide on the side of the frame that routes our cable. Position in this way. Make sure the forward section of this panel is under the black panel. And now we'll engage this sliding lock first. And then make sure all of our friction fasteners go through their grommets, bottom out, and place the machine screw that has Phillips head up here. Then re-engage the friction fasteners on the forward shroud. Repeat the procedure on that side. All right, now let's get the latch back in place. This bracket that covers The latch gets installed in this configuration. And the rest is really just fastener reassembly. And that's pretty much it. Show you the function again. Running light, standard brake light, left, right signal. These taillights are programmable, so you can actually take the passenger seat back off at any given point, power up the bike, and reach the programming button that is accessible from within this area. All right, so you have accessible 9 different program combinations. 3 are brake, 3 are signal. Here you see the strobing brake. This is called pulsar brake. And we have a couple different options for signaling that you can't really see very well in this configuration because we have not changed our signaling relay just yet. So it's flashing extremely fast. We do have standard, we do have scanning or sequential, and then we have pulsar. In the after shots section at the end of this video, we'll show you guys what these look like with the signal relay installed. That's pretty much it here. If you are interested in the relay, we do have it as a separate component on our website. It makes this assembly really, really easy. It's a plug and play component. We do have a separate video showing you how to install that. Anyway, for now, I'm gonna sign off. I really like how this taillight in our fender eliminator really transformed the tail end of this motorcycle into a sleek and sexy sort of shape that takes into account all of the body lines and the design language of this motorcycle and brings it all back here, makes it look very, very techy and cool. So I hope you guys agree. If you do, check it out at tstindustries.com. We'll see you there.